friends, it's Gloria. Welcome back to another video. If you can already tell by this title, this is going to be my 1K Q&A. So I reached over 1,000 subscribers at this point, and I am so grateful. I still cannot believe it. I've been on BookTube for about a year and several months, and I'm just so thankful for this community. It's been the absolute best, and I can't believe that there is now over 1,000 of you that care about my opinions on books and random things. So I appreciate it so much, and this is just a culmination of a big thank you video as well as answering your guys' questions. So I've divided them into some life questions, just personal questions about my life, as well as all bookish related questions. And we'll be having a special guest pop in at some point to help me answer a question. So this might be a bit of a longer video. I'll try my best to answer these questions as succinctly as I can. Question 1, and I got a couple of these, is what do I do for a living? And someone asked, do I raise bees and am I a librarian? So for some background, I went to business school, got my business and marketing degree at University of Portland. I was doing marketing for a while for a social media advertising agency, and I got to do some really cool projects and was primarily in like the Instagram world and putting out social media posts for really cool companies and some really cool people. And overall that was a great experience, but I kind of got burnt out and wasn't really vibing it anymore. So in 2018 I quit and started working for my family business officially. So I grew up in actually this exact same house that I'm currently living in. My parents own a 4-acre piece of land, and my dad is a beekeeper. So we have a family honey and beekeeping business, and my dad is the main beekeeper. He has some beekeeping employees, and my mom also helps run the business. And I grew up around bees and honey. I grew up on this farm. I grew up like filling up honey and doing things, but I always just did it on the side. I didn't actually like do it for employment. But in 2018 I was kind of like at a loss for what I wanted to do, so I decided to shift gears and try this family business thing out. So did a website. We built a really cool on-site shop. I'll insert a picture, called The Hive, and now we sell honey from this little storefront. In the summer I got involved in farmers markets, and so selling honey at some local farmers markets here too. So have been doing that part-time for the last several years. And then in this last year, in 2021, I obviously got really into books and into BookTube, and I thought it'd be so fun to work at the library. So I applied, and in the summer, July 2021, I got a position as a library aide, and that is putting books away. So shelving, primarily getting books from the book drop, getting books off of pick lists. So when you put a book on hold, a whole list prints out and people at the library have to go pick those books off the shelves and put them on your hold shelf. Bunch of various little tasks at the library, and I've been doing that ever since. I actually just got promoted this last week to library assistant. So no longer a library aide, but a library assistant. So I'll be doing some of the same tasks, but also primarily customer service focused and standing behind the desk, helping people with library cards or various questions that they have about their account. I'm very excited for the promotion, so that's gonna be really fun. And I'm potentially thinking about going back to school for a master's of library science. I still have not decided because school is expensive, and that would be maybe a bit of much, and it's a very competitive field, and I've heard it's kind of hard to get a job as an actual librarian in Oregon. So we'll see where that takes me, but for now I work 2 part-time jobs. All right, the next question is, what are your favorite and least favorite Russian and Eastern European dishes? So this was a great question. So another thing about me is that I am Russian and Ukrainian. My dad is originally from Moscow area. My mom is from Odessa, Ukraine. So I'm part Russian, part Ukrainian. They were married in Odessa, Ukraine, and immigrated to the US in 1989. I have 2 older siblings that were born in Ukraine, but I was born in America. So technically an American, but culturally I am Slavic, and I speak Russian. I read a little bit of it, but I speak Russian with my parents and on a regular basis in my life. And yeah, I grew up eating a lot of Russian food and Russian cuisine. I actually just talked about this book, Kachka, in my January wrap-up. This is a cookbook I got for Christmas. It's all about Russian cooking, and it's elevated. It's based off a restaurant that's here in Portland. This was a really fun read, and it gave me some inspiration for answering this question. So for favorite dishes, I have quite a few. Russian cuisine is known to have some odd stuff. For one who is not in the know and does not have a palate that's used to trying some funky foods, it's definitely not the cuisine for everyone, but I grew up eating a bunch of weird stuff. So some favorites for me are green borscht, or it's called sorrel soup. So sorrel is like a really tart, spinachy. It's almost like spinach plus lemon. It's not really sold in any grocery stores in the US, but in Russia it's like a main ingredient in a lot of cooking. It's a really good soup. Another soup that I love, soup is a big thing in Russian cooking. It's like a must and required eating, but I love solyanka, which is like a pickle, cabbage, and deli meat, like smoked meat soup. It's kind of soup that you like throw everything in that you have in your fridge. I also love pelmeni. These are little Russian dumplings that are filled with some kind of meat and onion mixture, and you eat them with some vinegar and some sour cream, and I put a little black cracked pepper on there, and it's amazing, so good. I also love sprotte. These are one of the weirder things. So it's like, take a French baguette and you cut a slice off, and then you spread like a mayo-y garlicky mixture, and then a sprotte is like a sprat. So it's a fish, a tiny little fish that's from the herring family, that's canned and salted. That full fish goes on top with like a slice of pickle and a little bit of hard-boiled egg. These are a very popular like appetizer for any kind of holiday party or birthday party or any kind of hosting event. And for dessert, I love honey cake. That was one of the cakes that we had at our wedding. Really delicious cake, and you know, honey is in it, so it makes it taste even better. And then I love sour cherry vareniki, which are also like dumplings, but they're filled with fruit. Those are some favorites. I realize that's a lot, but there's some really good food in Russian cuisine. For least favorite, I don't necessarily like hate anything. I'm willing to try anything, but some things that are just not my favorite is salo, which just essentially straight up pork fat. Usually it's a slice of dark rye bread and some garlicky mayo-y thing, and then just a slab of pork fat, kind of like uncooked bacon, but it's safer to eat because it's like cured, so you can eat it. But I don't really love fatty things. I also don't love cow tongue, because I know there's some very popular Russian Ukrainian dishes with cow tongue as a main ingredient. Not really my vibe. And then selyotka, which is salted cured herring fish, and it's essentially just like straight up sushi. So I don't know why I wouldn't like it, because I love sushi, but usually it's just eaten like with onions and that's it, and maybe like some boiled potatoes on the side. But I don't love it, and I kind of steer clear of that. But it's also not like horrible. I just kind of avoid it if it's there. Moving on. So the next question is, what is your favorite place that you have traveled to, and where do you still want to go? At this point, I have traveled to 22 different countries and 23 different states, and I have a bunch of favorite places. Actually, not that I totally want you to go watch these because they are kind of embarrassing, but at the start of this channel, I created a bunch of dance videos with friends, and that usually was different travel locations. So we have one set in Germany and all over Europe. We have one in New Zealand, a couple in the East Coast, and also a Grand Canyon road trip. So I would travel with friends and we'd make these dance videos. I've been to quite a few places, beautiful places. Some favorites and standouts include Budapest, Hungary. I just have like such fond memories. I spent my 19th birthday there. I had some amazing cuisine at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and I just loved everything about Budapest. The food, the people. It was also like the perfect weather. I just loved Budapest so much. Berlin will always be a standout because that was my first solo travel experience. So I was in Berlin for a week completely by myself for the first time, and I just had a ton of fun doing some solo exploring in that city. And it was also a really cool city, a lot of incredible and sad history, but really loved Berlin. I saw myself living there. Life went a different direction, but I was like, if I'm gonna like move to Europe someday, maybe I'd live in Berlin. I've also been to some incredible places in Italy, and I have such fond memories of Florence because I went there with my sister. That was the last time I was in Europe. Some places I want to go. So I have been to the UK. Dublin and London were my first exposure to Europe. In 2013, it was the first time I went to Europe. I absolutely fell in love, and actually my husband and I, fingers crossed, I hope it happens, who knows with COVID and everything, but we really hope to go on this epic UK trip, hopefully in August or September of this year. So we're in the planning phases. We hopefully will get some things booked soon, but we really want to do a England, Scotland, Ireland epic trip. Besides that, top of the list is definitely, I want to go to Croatia and Greece, and I really want to go to Cape Town, South Africa. I feel like those would all be some incredible places, but really everywhere's on the list. And all right, for this next question, I was asked, I'm going to bring in a special guest to help me answer it. And the question is how did you and your hubby meet? And I thought, well, I'll just bring in my hubby and we can answer that question together. So everyone, this is Brendan. Brendan, say hi to the people.
Hello, people.
I thought I'd bring you in to help answer this question. So you want to take it away? How did we meet? And then I'll fill in any gaps.
So we met kind of near the end of 2018. A mutual friend of ours who I went to college with, I reconnected with her. Her name's Lily, and she invited me to a swing dancing lesson that she regularly went to. I decided to go, and it was a lot of fun. I brought a buddy because I was a little nervous to go by myself. And then guess who was there? Gloria, who was one of Lily's best friends.
Yeah.
Was there, and then I met her and other people there, and eventually as the night came to a close, I had to text Lily, and I was like, so, your friend Gloria, what's her story? Tell me things. And that's kind of how we first met. It blossomed from there.
So a mutual friend introduced us, which was great, and West Coast swing dancing was a lot of fun. And I didn't think too much, I just thought he was cute. What are you doing?
Dancing.
Okay. Thought he was cute, and then we ended up texting, and our first date was actually going to church together. I know, so wholesome. But then we also went to a bar afterwards and had drinks, so some church and drinks. And that was a lot of fun. I actually walked away thinking, I have absolutely nothing in common with this guy at all. I was like, he is an American boy, completely not cultured. I don't care about sports at all. I mean, he did seem very passionate about his job, which is PT, but physical therapist, but I, besides that, didn't think too much. Then we ended up going on some group hangs and hike and hang out with people, and stuff sparked from there. So that's our story, and then we dated for about a year, and then we got married on September 1st, 2019. I'll insert a picture right here of our wedding day. So I've been married for about 2.5 years.
Almost the whole pandemic, basically.
So yeah, that's how we met. And then since you're here, you have 3 questions for me. You can ask me those questions and I'll answer them. We're transitioning now into bookish questions. So he came up with some and I'll answer them, and then he's gonna go away because he doesn't want to listen to me talk about books for too long.
First question, what are the top 3 reasons why you value reading and you're driven to read more?
Okay.
30 seconds on the clock.
Top 3, I don't know, but I'm gonna say because I think the most thing I value about reading is definitely of how much I learn. So I feel like I have grown so much in my empathy and just knowledge of various things, various life stories, different people's experiences in books, whether fiction or nonfiction. I feel like I have just been learning so much. And then also connecting with other people, particularly now on BookTube. I am gonna keep reading because I value and I cherish this community so much that it is now a driving factor into at least the kind of books that I want to pick up and that I want to talk about and share with you all. So that's a driving factor for sure. But learning is number 1. I always have a takeaway from a book I read, even if I didn't like it.
And I don't personally know like anything really about BookTube, but I know that it brings her a ton of joy and she really loves it. And I love hearing about it. Lots of stories when I come home from work. So question number 2, what do you love most about being on BookTube? Or being a booktuber? Yeah,
probably an answer that you've heard before and a lot of people say I think is the number 1 answer to this question is the community. I absolutely was blown away how kind and amazing everyone is on here. From other booktubers to commenters, subscribers, everyone in between. They're just like the kindest, most wholesome, best people on the internet, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it. It's been so fun to connect with different people from all over the world too, and just various walks of life that have totally different stories that I don't know how we would ever have met otherwise, but here we are chatting on a daily basis about books and also about other things. Yeah, it's been so fun to connect with you all.
Last question. If there was a book written about you or your life, what would it be titled?
That's a really tough question. I am not very creative at all or punny, so I can't even come up with like a clever title. The closest I could come up with is Being Glorious, and it would be B-E-E-I-N-G and then glorious. Bees are a part of my life, and also like my faith is part of my life, so like glorifying God and like honeybees and then everything else in between. But I don't think my life would make a really interesting book yet, so I still have more years to live before anything interesting, super interesting happens.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here,
yep,
for helping me answer a couple questions. And you can go now, you're free to go, and I'll continue answering more questions.
Out of here.
All right, that's my husband, everyone. Moving on, answering some more book questions. The next question I got was, how do you make time for reading? There's always something that takes priority. That is true. There's just a lot. There's minimal time in the day and a lot of stuff to do. And I feel like as I get older, there's just more things to do. I can only imagine when kids come in the picture and other stuff changes, it's gonna be even tougher to prioritize. But right now, reading and BookTube have really become my only hobbies, and puzzling. But I have used to watch a ton of TV and movies. Like that happened almost every single night. And that has drastically decreased, if not completely went away, except for maybe like once a week I'll watch something, maybe if that, could be even every other week. Reading has become a much more of a priority, and usually for me it's mornings and evenings if I'm physically reading. But then throughout the day, audiobooks are a big game changer. They're what got me back into reading. I used to commute to work, and sometimes I would sit in the car for an hour and a half every day, and I needed something to listen to besides podcasts and music, and so I found audiobooks. Actually listened to the whole Harry Potter series. That's what like really re-sparked my love for reading. And audiobooks I listen to all throughout the day. So that's part of the reason why I read so much, is because I can, because I really don't even listen to music anymore or podcasts. I literally just listen to books. The next question had a few of these, is what is your favorite book of 2021? What are your top 3 favorite books of all time? And what was your favorite book when you were a kid? So for 2021 favorites, I will link the videos down below. I have a fiction favorites list and a nonfiction favorites list. I couldn't just pick one book. Are you kidding me? I read way too many good books. So I'll list those down below if you're at all interested in watching. Some all-time faves. I mean, some books I read in 2021 are definitely all-time faves. I will mention a few others that I read in previous years. So I would consider before Redeeming Love by Francine was a absolute favorite book. I recently reread it in January. I don't know if I'd consider it a favorite anymore, but now it's also made me rethink some books that I have now been considering favorites that I might need to reread to see if they still hold up. So I would consider The Nightingale by Kristin a favorite, but I read that like 5+ years ago at this point, so I feel like that I'm due for a reread on that to figure out if it's still a favorite. For nonfiction, I really love American Kingpin, one of my first nonfiction books that I was completely so invested in. It was very fascinating. Some other standouts that I have read many times and would probably consider favorites is The Book Thief, though I haven't read that in many years. Probably due for a reread as well. The Harry Potter series is an absolute favorite. Loveology by John Mark Comer, I'll mention that in a second too, but that is a Christian nonfiction book that I've read a ton and is very impactful. Favorite books as a kid, I actually was recently talking about with a friend of mine because I have a bad memory. I don't remember really anything before middle school in terms of what I did too much with my time. So I checked in with my childhood best friend and I was like, hey, I know we played a bunch of games, but did we read a lot? She's like, yeah, we read a ton. Some standouts when I was a kid was definitely the Series of Unfortunate Events, The Number of the Stars by Lowry. I feel like that was a very impactful and important book for me. The Nancy Drew books, the Dive series was big when I was a kid. The Left Behind children's series. Some books by Frank Peretti, some of his children's books also. I went to a Christian elementary school, so some Christian children's content that I was reading. And then in terms of middle school, some books that I remember being very impactful was of course the Twilight series, the Uglies, Pretties, Specials series, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants books. Those were big when I was a kid and in my adolescence as well. I feel like I need to reread all of those because I'm just so curious how they hold up now. Maybe I'll do a whole reread series like Caleb from Books and Lala, but probably not. It's a big commitment. I have so many other books I want to get to, but maybe some here and there I'll pick up now and then to try out. This next question is sort of along the same lines. What are some books that have shaped your life the most? That's kind of a hard one to answer, but I feel like an obvious one is the Bible. Scripture is important reading. I think one of my all-time favorite verses from the Bible is Philippians 4:8. The verse is, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I think that's a very impactful piece of scripture that has shaped my life because I've been in my head a lot and I'm such a worrier and just my thought life sometimes wanders in dark places, and so I feel like that has really made me shift my thinking and it's the starting place for a lot of how the day goes. And then some other books, I mentioned Loveology by John Mark Comer. This was a pastor of mine and he wrote this book all about love and sex and marriage, and it was a very impactful book about how I approach dating and now marriage, and that has shaped how I view this very important aspect of my life. And then I'll also mention Number of the Stars by Lowry. I think it was my first exposure to historical fiction in some aspects, and World War II historical fiction, reading something that's very important but also very impactful and sad. And also the Harry Potter series, like I mentioned, listening to those as audiobooks completely changed my reading life to now listening to so many more audiobooks and being in love with audiobooks. The next question is, what components would your favorite fiction and nonfiction book contain? Example, genre, length, series or standalone, topics, narrator, etc. Really good question. I'm still figuring that out. I feel like I don't fully know, but I have some thoughts. So for fiction, genre, typically historical fiction. That's my favorite one. I love reading about realistic experiences, a story based on true events and something that maybe actually happened, and it feels realistic. It feels like it could have happened. It feels like I'm there with the characters. Speaking of characters, they have to be lovable characters that I want to root for, and I'm in it with them. I care about them and their outcome in their life and what they're doing. Not that there can't be a villain, but there needs to be a character that I want to root for. So ideally a lovable, heroic really good character. I'd probably prefer a standalone to a series. I'd rather just read like one really good book than dive into like a huge series of books in terms of like time commitment, and sometimes the plot can kind of drag on. So I'd probably prefer standalone, and page length, probably 400 is a good spot. It's long enough for me to dive in and care, but not like too long where I'm like, oh boy, this is a big one. So if it's historical fiction, I realize I don't totally care about dual timelines. It's not my preferred. I know some people love dual timelines. I don't necessarily love them. Sometimes I actually feel like they are a hindrance to the success of the book, because sometimes I'm invested in one timeline way more than I am in the other ones. I don't mind like a jumping back and forth between future and past, but I want it to be maybe at least the same character. I don't like it when it's like completely one character and then completely another character in two different timelines. I feel like there should be a stronger connection point. I don't mind multiple perspectives. I also don't mind one perspective, so I don't have really a preference on that yet. I think I mentioned this in my December reading wrap up. I really like when someone is retelling their life story. So in that sense, I don't mind like a dual timeline, because they are in the future, they're older, they've lived their life, and they're going back in time and like retelling some major events that happened in their life. So for nonfiction, like I mentioned, I love when something's based on a real event. So I love nonfiction because it's a real event. It actually happened. This person really lived their life. They really went through this, and it feels real because it is. So I love nonfiction for that reason. I love when someone is telling their personal story, so a memoir of something they lived through or something they experienced. Books like Just Mercy, Know My Name, Becoming, The Hiding Place, Educated, all really fantastic books. And for nonfiction, I also really love like a journalistic uncovering of events. So for example, books like American Kingpin, which I mentioned earlier, was an absolute favorite of mine, all about the dark web, and I really loved Columbine, the way that one was written. That one is all about a school shooting, and that was an incredible book. Even something like An Oral History of 9/11, The Only Plane in the Sky, that was this collection of interviews from various people, and it wove this story together of what happened on 9/11. So I like the idea of like interviewing and collecting all of these different things like a journalist would, and putting together this really like presentation of what happened in that event or that day. And this next question fits in very nicely. What kind of topics that you haven't delved into yet would you still like to read in nonfiction? I'm really open to anything. Like I have a very diverse range of nonfiction reading that I like to do. I have, you know, some books that I know that I love. Like I love a Holocaust story, of having someone tell their own story of their experience. Books like The Hiding Place, Night, currently reading Mouse, which is a graphic novel. I love those books. They are such hard books to read, but I feel like very important books. However, in terms of what I haven't dove into yet, I really want to read a different perspective from different countries. I would love to learn more about some Asian history, some Mexican history, South American history. I know quite a bit of US history. I know quite a bit of UK history and Russian history. Those are like my three sweet spots, and also more of the kind of books that are available. So I would love to read about some experiences from these people that lived in different countries that went through something that I did not get to learn about in my school setting, in my education, but also as an adult that I don't get to see very often or hear many people talk about. So I would love to just diversify my nonfiction reading from various places. So if you have any recommendations, I'm always open and looking for recommendation for books that are telling a story about something different that I just wasn't aware of before. And I think those kinds of books are the ones that I love because they blow my mind. They open up my eyes to an experience that I just didn't know that happened. So yeah, I feel like I'm willing to pick up pretty much anything. If it's highly praised and sounds really interesting, or about a historical moment, or about a person that I don't know much about that went through something wild, I would love to learn. The next question is, what are 3 books that you don't see yourself ever reading, and why? I will link my anti-TBR tag. I made that video quite a few months ago. I talk all about some books and authors that I just don't see myself picking up. But to answer this question somewhat, I really don't see myself picking up any Stephen King books. I'm not a horror genre reader at all. I shouldn't say at all, because I did read Walking Dead last year and really enjoyed it, but I just don't see myself gravitating towards Stephen King's writing, except for maybe the only book I pick up is 11/22/63, because it's a historical fiction. I feel like that one's I'd actually be willing to pick up. I also, just again more broadly, there is a really big trend right now for like Greek and Roman mythology retellings, like Circe, which I actually have read, like Song of Achilles, like Ariadne, Women of Troy. Like there's a lot of books in this field right now. I really don't think those are my kind of books. For some reason, I just don't really care. Like, I don't think I care about Greek and Roman mythology retellings. Not that there's absolutely anything wrong with them, but I just don't find myself drawn to that at all. Like, nothing about them seems compelling or interesting to me as a reader. So I don't think I'm gonna read like any of those books. I read Circe and I gave that one 2 stars. So I was like, I don't even want to kind of try again because I just know I'm not gonna like them. The next question is, what is a book that you feel embarrassed by or hesitant to say that you like? Good question, putting me on the spot. I mentioned this in my 2021 reading stats and survey video. I'm definitely a little ashamed to say that I really enjoyed the Walking Dead series. I think it's because this series like embodies a lot of what I don't love in books. It's incredibly violent, incredibly gruesome, incredibly crude, like intense sexual scenes, really intense language, some terrible villainous humans that you're like the worst kind of characters, zombies, you know, like what? So many things that I would never ever pick up in a book, and I would not also recommend this series to too many people. I just picked this up because I was familiar with the show and I was such a fan of Rick Grimes as a character that I wanted to read the original source material and what the creators of this world intended to happen. And I really enjoyed this comic series. I read all of it through, binged through it, and the comic series is significantly better than the TV series. I think I'm also slightly embarrassed to say that I like the Outlander series and that I'm continuing to read them. I think there's some things in them also that are problematic to some readers and people tend to avoid, but I don't know. I love Claire and Jamie and I love their relationship, and the author wrote them incredibly well, and so I'm in it and I'm rooting for them and I'm making my way through the series. I don't read many other kind of guilty pleasures, but I also am like, I don't know, you shouldn't really feel guilty to be reading whatever you're reading. You could read anything you want, and I don't think people should necessarily make you feel super bad about it. Next question, have you read Animal Farm before? This question came from a cousin of mine, but yes, I did read Animal Farm by George Orwell in school. Oh, plane. I read it in my 9th grade English class, I believe. I remember liking it. I think I remember writing a paper about it. I don't really remember too much else. I know that it shows like the Soviet experience. I would be interested to reread it as an adult and have some takeaways from it. I think a lot of the books that I feel like were required reading in high school, like we just missed the point because we were so young to understand them fully. And I think as an adult, I'd maybe appreciate it more. So I'm interested in a reread of Animal Farm. The next question isn't really a question, but it is, I'd love a good beach read recommendation. I know you love historical fiction and I usually read self-help, but would love something light and airy. That's funny because I don't read any light and airy books, like at all. I don't read any kind of like rom-com beach reads, but something light and airy, the closest I could come up with, I'm gonna grab it. Dear Mrs. Bird, this is a book that I recommended a lot and I will keep recommending. This is a historical fiction. It's set in London during the Blitz. There's some sad things in this book, but in general, the feel of it is pretty light and airy. It's sweet, it's wholesome. There's some cute romance. It's a really good friendship. So in terms of like overall lightness of the book, so I would say like this is a good example of that kind of book. It's not too heavy and overly long or anything like that. So I would see myself reading this at the beach. The other recommendation for a beach read kind of book is Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. This also isn't the most light book. This is like a mystery thriller, but it's written in a very light and comedic and witty way. There's some tough subject matter in here. There's some domestic violence and sexual assault, but there are handled also very, it feels like a Desperate Housewives. Like there's these moms, stay-at-home moms, kindergarten moms, and there's some drama and school drama and just this community of people. The characters were written very well. It was a fun read, a quick read, and this is totally a book that I would see myself like reading on the beach. So those are my 2 recommendations. I don't know if they're the most light and airy books. If you have your top favorite light and airy book, recommend it down below to the person maybe watching this. For them, the ultimate beach read recommendation. Maybe it's Beach Read by Emily Henry. I haven't read that yet, so I can't recommend it. And then the last question that I was asked to wrap this video up is, what is a book that left you speechless for any reason, good or bad? I had a tough time answering this question because I don't know if a lot of things leave me speechless. The closest experience to what I think like being left speechless is I remember a movie that I'll mention in a second where I felt so shocked that I actually like grabbed the wall, my jaw dropped, and I went like like an intake of breath, like I can't believe that just happened. Like that like shock, speechless I don't really have had too many books that do that. That experience that I had was when I watched Marvel The Avengers Infinity War. That one scene in the end, if I won't spoil it, but like there's dust and a lot of characters disappear. You think everyone died, and it is such a cinematic moment. I experienced that in watching that movie. In terms of books, I felt some shock value in No Exit by Taylor Adams. That was a book that kind of had some jaw-dropping moments, and I was just like so action-packed that I was like, what is happening? So that one was kind of intense. I remember being incredibly just like angry and like I couldn't believe that it happened, was Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is a nonfiction book about the radium girls in the 1920s that worked at factories, and they were getting a bunch of radium poisoning and no one was listening to them, and just full of just horrific things that people went through, and their voices were not heard and there was no justice served. It was a book that just will just make you so mad. And I think some other books also, I mentioned The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett M. Graff and Columbine by Dave Colin are both nonfiction books that have really, really tough subject matter. They were very important reads, but they just also left me completely just brokenhearted and in awe of what happened on those days. I think they kind of have that shock factor. So yeah, those are my answers to those questions. Thank you so much for asking those questions. Hope you got a chance to get to know me a little bit more. If you have any follow-up questions or anything that jogged your mind, you're like, oh, I want to know that, leave it down below. I'll answer it in a comment. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel, for embracing me into this community. This is such a fun space and I so appreciate it. It's been the best year plus, and I'm so excited for what's ahead and for all the great books that I get to read and for all the awesome conversations I get to have with you all. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys in more videos soon. Bye.